Booker T. Washington. You've definitely heard the name, maybe you've seen the statues. He was an absolutely towering figure, easily one of the most powerful black men in American history. But his story? Well, it is not that simple. Not by a long shot. In fact, his legacy is one of the most hotly debated in the entire fight for civil rights. To really get him, we need to unpack the man, his methods, and the incredibly tough world he lived in.
For about 25 years, from the Gilded Age all the way into the Progressive Era, Washington was the guy. He was the voice of Black America. He advised presidents, he controlled huge amounts of money for charities, and he built this political network that was so powerful, people literally called it the Tuskegee machine. And it's how he built that machine that people still argue about so fiercely today.
So that's really the big question we're digging into here. Was he this brilliant, pragmatic strategist, playing the long game inside a system that was completely stacked against him? Or was he, as his critics love to say, an accommodator who just gave up way too much, trading fundamental rights for a little bit of economic progress? To figure that out, we've got to go back to the very beginning.
Washington's entire philosophy, everything he believed, was forged in the fire of his early life. You just can't understand the leader he became without understanding the little boy who was born into slavery.
He was born into slavery in Virginia back in 1856. He never even knew who his white father was. His memories of childhood, which he wrote about in his book Up From Slavery, were just filled with this brutal, dehumanizing poverty. I mean, that quote says it all, doesn't it? It wasn't just about the forced labor. It was about being treated like you weren't even human.
So freedom finally comes when he's 9 years old. And what's the very first thing he wants more than anything else? An education. He developed this intense hunger for books and was just determined to learn how to read. He worked in coal mines to save up money, and eventually he made his way to Hampton Institute, a school for freed slaves, where he paid his tuition by working as the janitor.
I mean, just look at this journey. It's incredible. You go from being a slave boy with no last name to, by the time you're 25, being handpicked to lead a brand new school in Alabama. This wasn't some kind of accident or luck. This was pure, relentless force of will, a drive that would define his entire life and really shape his vision for the future.
And that drive led him to found his own school, the Tuskegee Institute. And this place became the physical manifestation of his entire philosophy. You see, it wasn't just a place to learn. The school was the lesson.
Washington's thinking went something like this. In the South, after the Civil War, trying to agitate for political rights was not just going to fail, it was flat out dangerous. So he argued that the real path to equality had to start with economic self-sufficiency. He preached that learning practical skills, getting an industrial education, and proving the economic value of black citizens, those were the first, most important steps.
Now this is what's so fascinating. He was being completely literal with his philosophy. The students at Tuskegee didn't just show up for class. They literally built the school from the dirt up. They made the bricks with their own hands, they constructed the buildings, they grew all their own food. Washington believed this whole process taught them more than just skills. It gave them dignity, pride, and a deep sense of self-reliance.
And you know what? It worked. By the time he died in 1915, the Tuskegee Institute had an endowment worth about $2 million. Now that may not sound like a ton today, but back then, that was a massive fortune. It was a powerhouse of black education and proof that his leadership and fundraising were incredibly successful. But that success came with a huge controversy. Okay, this is the moment. This is what launched Washington into the national spotlight, but also made him the #1 target for his critics. In 1895, he gets invited to speak at a huge exposition in Atlanta, which was, a massive deal for a black man in the Deep South at that time.
In this speech, he basically laid out a historic bargain. He told the white South, look, we will not agitate for the right to vote or for social integration, for now. In return, he asked, give us access to education and economic opportunities so we can lift ourselves up by our bootstraps. Well, white leaders, both in the North and the South, they absolutely loved it. But many black leaders were horrified.
And his biggest and most famous critic was W.E.B. Du Bois, a brilliant Harvard-educated scholar. Du Bois argued that Washington's go-slow approach was basically a surrender. He demanded full civil rights, and he wanted them now. He believed in creating a talented 10th, a black intellectual elite to lead the race forward. And it was Du Bois who gave Washington that famous, stinging label, the Great Accommodator.
That Atlanta speech gave Washington an unbelievable amount of influence.
He used it to build that formidable network of power and money we talked about, the Tuskegee machine, directing millions in charity funds and controlling political appointments.
And you can see that influence right here. On one side, he's with President Teddy Roosevelt. This was a monumental moment. He was the first black man ever invited to dine at the White House, and it caused a national uproar. On the other side, he's with Andrew Carnegie, one of the richest men on the planet. This was his strategy in action: get the ear of the most powerful people in America and steer their money and influence towards black education.
So on the surface, it looks like a pretty clear strategy of just accommodating. Publicly, he's telling black Americans to accept segregation, at least for now. But his public stance, that wasn't the whole story. It wasn't even close.
So get this. This is the crucial point. While Washington was out there publicly preaching accommodation and patience, he was secretly waging war on Jim Crow. He used his access and his wealth to secretly funnel a ton of money into legal challenges against segregation and laws that were stopping black people from voting. He was playing two games at the exact same time: a public game of compromise and a secret game of resistance.
Wow. I mean, learning that completely changes how you see him, right? It forces us to go right back to our main question, but now it's got this whole new layer of complexity.
And his impact, it was very, very real. Through his connection with a philanthropist named Julius Rosenwald, Washington helped create a program that built over 5,000 modern schools for black children all across the rural South. This was a monumental achievement that literally changed countless lives.
So when you try to lay it all out, his legacy is just this incredible study in contrasts. Did he build powerful black institutions and get funding that nobody else could have gotten? Absolutely. Did he do it by publicly playing along with a racist system and telling people not to protest? Yes, he did. And this contradiction is exactly why he's still such a fascinating and controversial figure. He was a pragmatist, a realist, working in what felt like an impossible situation.
Ultimately, there are no easy answers here. Was he a hero or was he a compromiser? Maybe he was both. It forces us to ask a really tough question. When you're facing overwhelming oppression, what is the right way to fight back? And how do we judge a leader who chose to battle a rigged system not by trying to tear it down from the outside, but by trying to subvert it from within?